The rain had slackened to a highland drizzle, the type that lingers more as a presence than a downpour, and a silver-grey hush cloaked Edinburgh's old town. In the narrow winds off the Royal Mile one could still hear tour guides explaining to shivering visitors how John Knox once thundered from the pulpit of St. Giles, how Jenny Geddes flung a stool in protest, how Walter Scott revived the honours of Scotland after they lay forgotten in a dusty chest. It is the kind of layered, half-remembered history that seeps up through the very basalt beneath the city. Into this tapestry of memory stepped the King and Queen, their arrival almost paradoxically quiet for so momentous an occasion. There was no medieval flourish of trumpets this time, no massed pipes rattling the air, instead only that faint mist drizzle, the scuff of ceremonial shoes on cobbles and the low murmur of the Royal Company of Archers taking post. They are the monarch's bodyguard in Scotland, their green uniforms trimmed in gold, eagle feathers sprouting from Balmoral bonnets, longbows a ceremonial echo of an age before firearms. As rain stitched tiny silver beads across the black feathers of the king's cocked hat, he paused at the west door beneath the crown spire, inhaled a breath that tasted of wet slate and distant seaweed, and stepped inside the cathedral that holds both the nation's conscience and its collective memories. A cathedral of echoes. St. Giles is not vast by continental standards, but it feels enormous, because its stones have witnessed so much. Kings convened parliaments here long before the Act of Union, Covenanters swore oaths of defiance, and Charles II's regalia rested beneath its fan-vaulted crossing during a fraught age, when the crown itself seemed porous and uncertain. The building smells of centuries-old oak and candle grease and the faint tang of cold incense that creeps from the Thistle Chapel, with its carved angels clutching bagpipes, and salmon and thistles. And now, almost exactly 22 months, after Elizabeth II lay within these walls and the public queued through a bruising September night to file past her oak coffin, her son would place a permanent marker in the floor. A hush followed the royal party down the nave. Tourists, diplomats, military representatives and a handful of ordinary Edinburgh residents, lottery ballot winners, stood shoulder to shoulder, heads turning slowly as if choreographed. There was something intimate in the way Charles guided Camilla by the elbow toward the memorial site, a small square of new stone temporarily concealed beneath a fold of St. Giles' crimson canopy cloth. Before them stood the Very Reverend Dr. Fiona Douglas, Dean of the Thistle, her white rochet glimmering beneath the low cathedral light. She spoke not of empire or dynasties, but of the simple bond between a mother and her eldest son. We carve in stone only what has already been carved in the heart. When Charles tugged a thin, braided cord, the cloth slipped aside and the slate appeared, deep charcoal flecked with quartz, its surface hand-polished to a subtle sheen. The crown of Scotland at the top, rendered in lightly incised strokes that caught stray candle flame, beneath, ER2, and then 12 to 13 September 2022. Queen Elizabeth II lay at rest in this place. Nothing more. No flourish of epitaph, no explanatory footnote. The stone's restraint is its eloquence. It forces the viewer to remember, to fill in the silence with personal recollection, late-night television glimpses of mourners filing past, news helicopter shots of the coffin crossing the Forth, or one's own memory of standing in drizzle, stomach-tight, with that curious national grief that seemed so surprising in its ferocity. A private moment beneath public gaze. Those who watched the king in that instant noticed the tiny flicker across his brow. A single tear did not fall, duty and discipline are second nature, but his breath caught, and Camilla gave the gentlest squeeze to his forearm. In that squeeze was 35 years of shared history, of wounds weathered in tabloid storms, of a late queen's gradual acceptance, and finally of a coronation less than 15 months gone. Now, together, they bore witness for a nation. Outside, the rain began again in earnest. Crowds lining Parliament Square produced a collective rustle of umbrellas, the colours, navy, Stuart tartan, Edinburgh fringe logos, spreading like sea anemones in gentle surf. Police motorcycles carved a wet gleam on the tarmac as the royal convoy pulled away, headed back down Canongate to Holyrood House, where a reception for small business apprentices awaited. Such is monarchy, from raw emotion into scheduled duty without visible seam. Why Scotland, why here? Commentators have noted that Charles could easily have commissioned a memorial tablet for Westminster Abbey or Windsor. But to choose St. Giles is to honour a distinctly Scottish loyalty that persisted throughout his mother's reign. Elizabeth was not only Queen of Scots by legal fact, she was, by affection and habit, an adopted Highlander. She spent more consecutive summers at Balmoral than some schoolchildren spend at the same holiday cottage. She worshipped at tiny Crathy Kirk, and knew the names of all the Gillies' dogs. She understood, perhaps better than any monarch since Victoria, that the Union rests on more than parchment statutes. It rests on the tug of peat-rich soil, the echo of a lone piper across Glengelder at dusk. By laying the stone, Charles reminds Scotland that its grief was witnessed, its loyalty engraved. He also underscores his own vow, spoken in Gaelic at a Royal Week reception last year, to continue to seek out the new ways in which we together can give that service to others. If skeptics suggest monarchy wavers in relevance, gestures like this aim to anchor it again in shared ritual, shared loss, shared place. Intersecting timelines. The stone's unveiling coincided, almost to the hour, with Catherine, Princess of Wales, making her discreet post-treatment visit to a cancer well-being centre in Essex. That overlap was not planned, palace aides insist, yet the symmetry was striking. In Edinburgh, a son honoured the memory of a mother lost to time. In Colchester, a daughter-in-law quietly offered hope to families facing the very illness that has touched the royal circle this year. Two ends of a narrative arc: farewell and fight on, memory and momentum. What next for Royal Week? The King's Scottish Diary for the remaining days includes a visit to a Murray distillery pioneering net-zero whisky production, an investiture at the City Chambers for community stalwarts, and the annual garden party on Holyrood House lawns, kilts, fascinators, and home-baked shortbread mingling with project leaders in renewable energy startups. Camilla will read to school children from the Queen's reading room list, her voice brushing Doric and Borders accents with gentle encouragement. But amid those engagements, visitors to St. Giles will continue to pause at that slate square. Some may kneel, as one elderly woman did minutes after the royal party departed, placing a single white rose on the new stone before rising stiffly with tears on her cheeks. Others will whisper a brief prayer, or simply nod and move on, letting their footfall complete the remembrance. A final reflection. In the age of viral headlines, a modest piece of slate can appear almost defiantly quiet. Yet quiet, in this instance, is power. It reminds us that leadership sometimes speaks most loudly in restraint, that continuity is maintained not only through splendor, but through the reverent naming of a date, the marking of a moment when a city opened its heart to its queen for the last time. If you find resonance in such moments, if, like us, you believe history is written as much in small stones as in grand statues, consider leaving your own reflection below. Did the memorial's simplicity move you? Should similar tributes stand in other corners of the realm? Let's keep the conversation measured, thoughtful, and worthy of the quiet dignity we witnessed beneath St. Giles' vaulted roof. Until our next deep dive into royal service and symbolism, thank you for walking these stories with us. Remember to like, subscribe, and share if this extended narrative offered you a fuller sense of place and purpose. And as always, may your own pathways this week be graced with moments of quiet remembrance and renewed resolve. ChatGPT